Welcome back to part two of interview with the Old Mage with our special guest George Krashos. No, I've got one here. It could actually be for George and Ed because it's dealing with my absolute favorite topic.
Dwarves!
Hey, how'd you know? Well, kind of in that direction, but it's more broad than that. It's another Spike Murphy. What can Ed expand on, or George, about the Svirfneblin?
Oh,
It says there's there's very little information about them except for Blingdenstone info that's mostly from Bob Salvatore stories, a mention of a warren called Desselderikoth, and a tiny bit about the small community near Bloodstone Pass in Damara and Vasa. So what can you expand on that? Either one.
I would tell Spike to pay more attention to the things that Ed writes. Ed's talked about Svirfneblin in one of his old Dragon articles way back in Dragon 269, which was actually an article that started off about halflings hidden nobody knows in the New Adventures of Volo series. But he also then riffs into various gnome countries and gnome realms and talks about Svirfneblin being part of, let's see, I'm checking my sources as we speak. There's several gnome villages, and one of them, I think it was Frindle, I think it was. The article itself speaks about Svirfneblin being all through the area of the Deep Rift and the Deep Realm of the Dwarfs in the south. And there is a rumour of a gnome kingdom under the Endless Ice Sea near Icewind Dale, which has Svirfneblin present. So there are other wonderful places where those diminutive little gnomes feature in the realms.
and I can add some secrets of the realms now. I can reveal more, okay?
Oh, goody!
Yay!
Okay. Now, I can tell you that one of the reasons that Svirfneblin have been slighted is that a lot of the lore that I wrote for them is NDA, because it was for particular products, I was paid for it, I delivered it, and then they cut it, which means they still own it, and I can't,
I thought it was just the name.
Yeah, well, okay, but I can tell you that as of today in the realms, as in the late 1400s, heading towards the 1500s DR, there are flourishing Svirfneblin kingdoms very deep under both Saussel and Rorin. These two kingdoms have a prickly relationship with each other, and they often skirmish. The one under Saussel is known as Vorindarendelden. That's Vaurindarindelden. Vorindarendelden. And the one under Rorin is called Halathundurmir. Halathundurmir.
Jeez, that's worse than Bob and his elven names. That's amazing.
Okay, so the Vors of the North, so their nickname, that the people who live in that first realm, that first kingdom, are known as, colloquially as the Vors, V-A-U-R-S, Vors, or Vor for singular. The Vors of the North are isolationists. They avoid contact with other sentient races, seeing the best policy as waiting for those other races to destroy each other or degenerate into barbarism. The Vors are great glacier and underglacier, or for the British people amongst us, glacier and underglacier hunters, but they capture and breed most prey, farming them for stable food and fur and beast body derived medicines, supplies, rather than hunting to just slay and feast. They are ruled by a matriarchal council who use the male Vor King, 2 words, Vor King, as a spokesman and a judge in criminal trials. But the matriarchs, the council, decide all policy. Policies to do with supply lines, food security, and advanced planning are their fortes. The Halathans raid surface races and communities for tech, or trade for it with surface halflings and gnomes, and they have their own Gond-like belief in advancement through inventions and innovation. they have developed a lot of clockwork, portable/mobile devices, and stationary, utilizing deep volcanic rifts, steam engines of the sort that we real-world folk would call beam engines. So if you Google beam engines, they are developing improved armor, rapid-fire volley crossbows, and the like, and their warriors use long boar spears, hand axes, and skinning knives in battle. They are ruled by generals of both genders and wise ones, elders of both genders, who report to the Old Mother. That's a title. The Old Mother, a crone of great age who floats in a tank of sustaining elixirs, clear syrup that sometimes glows, of secret origin and composition. There are also Sverfneblin communities far, far under Mintarn and Tharsalt. The one under Mintarn has no contact with the surface, and the people in that community, the Sverfneblin, they tend to explore and mine and delve to the west under the sea, rather than to the east towards Faerun. The one that is under Tharsalt has secretly been Tharsalt's bankers and valuables vault keepers in their own labyrinth of deep trap and monster-guarded vaults for centuries. So if you're wondering where the Swiss banker-type storage Tharsalt's been offering and its riches, the fact that it has so much liquid cash to do commercial deals, that's the secret. There's a Sverfneblin community that is doing that from below. So there you go. New Realms lore to do with the Sverfneblin.
Well, along the same lines, he had an A and B questions also. What other interactions with Surface or Underdark cultures has there been with the Sverfneblin communities? And was there a deep gnome kingdom?
Well, there you go. Those are the two deep gnome kingdoms.
Those are it? Okay.
Their interactions? Well, any interaction you have with the Drow or the Illithids tends to be negative for you.
Unless you're a fan of slavery.
Yes, yeah. And so both the Sverfneblin and the gnomes had developed a policy of run away and hide, avoid, just do not engage, which is why we hear so little about them. Whereas the halflings went the other way. The halflings went let's go to the surface and live amongst the humans. And yes, gnomes do this, and yes, dwarves do this, but the halflings did it wholesale. That was their route, to live amongst these humans, because these humans breed like rabbits, they're bigger than we are, they're noisier than we are, they're greedier than we are, they're more creative than we are, they got more energy, they do silly, stupid things, whereas our Hin elders would go, that's crazy. That's not worth the cost. That's not worth the resources. Some human will do it anyway in an attempt to get richer or more powerful or, whatever. And we can benefit from all of their hard work, even when it's misplaced. So the halflings went up to the surface, if they weren't there already, and they live amongst all the human communities. More of the gnomes, and particularly the Sverfneblin, did let's run away and hide. Let's have nothing to do with these people. Because after all, as I just pointed out, the view of the Northern Kingdom, the Vors, is they're all going to destroy themselves and degenerate into barbarism sooner or later, probably later, and then we'll still be here and we'll step in and take advantage.
Right. So I'm going to have one more small question here, and I think you already answered it from Spike Murphy. We're going to move on to a different person. Is that what drove them in the Underdark to begin with? Is that they're a shunning of that surface life, and they just wanted to be by themselves, or what really drove them down into the Underdark?
Well, it's that, and it's a predilection for the same thing that fascinates the dwarves, the mineral wealth and what you can do with it. And to get your hands on that, you have to dig. It's very rare that you find. I mean, yes, it happens. It happened in our real world too, where you could have surface copper, you could have surface iron. We've got pig iron from so easily, but that stuff gets harvested pretty quickly if it's easy, and then you have to dig. And so they followed, and then they decided they like it down here.
Right. Okay, no, that makes sense. So I want to move on to a question by Eric Boyd.
Eric!
Eric, that's right. This one that George. Who's that? Some guy I've heard about. I'm not sure. I think he knows a little bit about the realms. I'm not sure.
Hi, Eric. I love you. You know that.
He wants to know if you can describe some of the currency employed by Eravandar and Urlan. I'm not sure if I'm saying these correctly. And Solavanad and Charvel.
Okay.
The ancient elven kingdoms.
Ancient elven kingdoms. He wants to know, was their currency, what form did it take? Is it still in use today? And would the elves in each kingdom's heyday have buried it in the tombs for any reason?
So, amongst the elves, if they're trading just with each other, not with non-elves, their currency would be particular seeds and particular living plants.
Really?
I mean, you could joke and say they're bonsai, but what I mean is, you hand over a healthy plant, a miniature healthy plant, and enough of the plant that you have enough there for germination, unless the plant uses insects or an outside force to germinate. So if it has a male and a female, you get them both, okay? You give the person enough, and in whatever protective coffer, and for elves that was all often a crystal egg, a magically sculpted out crystal, handheld, palm-sized, smooth-cornered, like an egg, container, and you are either giving seeds or you're giving living plants. And yes, many of them would exist within the tombs. There are some in the Baelnorn tombs, Baelnorn guarded tombs, the family tombs in Mithranor, right now. That was one of the things that was interred. And so it would be magically protected. So yes, indeed, some of this stuff would still be viable to plant and grow stuff. Ta-da! So there you go.
No, it's perfect. Thank you.
But they would be worth thousands of gold pieces to curios and collectors and historians and lore masters of the realms, clearly, wouldn't they?
Oh, sure. So if you're an elf, it comes down to, is this seed more important to my people, or the people who are near and dear to me, not necessarily the entire race, or is it more valuable to sell it to somebody who will pay me an obscene amount of, real-world coins, currency, trade bars, gems, so that I can use that. It's the old thing of, if you have your own currency, I'm now talking real world, and you go abroad to another country that has another currency and it's worth more, that other currency, when you bring it home, do you convert it and make a huge windfall? Or do you squirrel it away until the next time you go, leaving it untouched? And again, that's an individual decision and how to, but yeah, in many cases, this sort of currency would be, quote, priceless, unquote.
I was just wondering if the Vaishan of Aravandar might have used their payments, as it were, to introduce dark magic into their rivals, or spying magics, or other type of nefarious activities where it seemed that they were paying a debt or buying something, but in return, but actually what they were doing was using some of their darker type magic to see what they could do with the very princely largesse that they were bestowing on other elven realms or other individuals within their own realm.
But of course.
So that same riches, would that go across all the elven empires? For example, if you were an adventurer and you go into if you made it and you lived to get to the burial tombs in Mithranor, would you find this type of currency from Eravandar or Urlan in there that somehow made it into these crypts?
Yep. Probably not much of it, but yes, you would. You would also find, because Mithranor, was opened up to be a city for all races, when you would also find a currency that humans and dwarves and so on would value too, which means you'd get these really cool glowing blue alloy coins and so on, where the elves would do beautiful coins. To switch it back to a real world analog for a moment, stamp collectors quite often love the stamps of early Sierra Leone, because that country had gorgeous stamps with gilding and their giant and they got flocking and so on. So you look at it and say, gosh, that's beautiful. So even if you don't care too much about stamps, you go, wow, look at that, I want to have that. Well, in the same way, a lot of the elven currency, and by now I'm talking coins and so on, that you would also find in Mithranen tombs, is intrinsically beautiful, so that a dwarf who is used to very pure gold and working in gold goes, what's that? Oh, I gotta have that. What is that? Show me that. You know, rather than just saying, oh yeah, some silver, oh yeah, some gold. So I mean, the elves they intrinsically want things to be beautiful. That brings joy to their hearts. That's part of what they are as a race. Whereas more dwarves would value something that was perfectly suited for utility. They don't want the most beautiful hammer. They want the best hammer for the job. And if the best hammer for the job looks as ugly as somebody's broken hind leg, but it's perfect for the job, that's what they want. Whereas an elf say, oh no, that hammer has to have beautiful sweeping curves. It has to be beautiful. Even if I never lift it, I need to look at it and be uplifted by its beauty, because that's the difference in the races.
Right.
So their currency would be like that as well. So you would find both sorts.
So also along those lines, if you were a grave robber, unless you were unless you're well versed in elven lore, or any kind of lore in the realms, and you found yourself upon one of these Avrandar ruins or crypts, and you went through and you would find bags, or if you found boxes of these seeds and things, which to an elf would be priceless, you would probably just throw it on the ground and break it and keep looking for gold.
Yep. Toss it aside and keep digging.
So wouldn't that lose a lot of that precious lore or history to being ground under the feet of these thieves because they don't know what it's worth?
Yeah, quite possibly. Yeah. Likely.
Okay, just postulating there. George,
life is tragic.
Life comes at you fast.
Yes.
George, wasn't there a question from somebody on Candlekeep?
There have been several questions from Candlekeep, and one of them from Ilcerus was that he noted that in one of the previous releases, Ed had mentioned a bit about dwarven feuds, and he said he'd love to know more about this topic in order to bring a shield dwarf city to life. And he wanted specific examples of feuds, and if and when do dwarves actually try to kill one another or go to war with another clan, and any lines that will not cross in villainy, he said. Theft, he noted, seemed to be one from Dwarves Deep. I've been doing a bit of secret work on the realms with Eric Boyd recently, and that work has made it's made us touch upon the ancient dwarven realms. We touch everything, but we have been we've been talking a bit about the dwarven realms, and in one of the discussions I had at Candlekeep a little while ago, I said that dwarves are very honourable, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they're evil, but it can lead to bad behaviours. The clans array for battle, and a particular senior clan isn't given the position of honour in the battle line, and gets upset, and then turns around and refuses to fight, or walks away from the battle. Those things used to happen in the War of the Roses in England time and time again, during the Crusades, time and time again. And dwarves are very proud, as we know, and so I can imagine that there are many situations where feuds start from an honourable basis, and due to the stubbornness of the dwarves, live on in memory, such that you don't associate with Clan Stonebright because of that time that they refused your offer to join the clans with a grand wedding of the heirs, and Clan Stonebright didn't think you were good enough. And dwarves have a long memory, I think, as Ed said in FR11 Dwarves Deep. So I think there's many ways that dwarven attitudes and behaviours can trigger feuds and conflict between the clans that seem to live on forever.
I think that's a brilliant answer. I have nothing useful to add. That's it. There you go.
I think that's a first as well, Jeff. Is that correct?
I think that's a first. That's even shorter than the early one, right, Curry?
I mean, Ed being stumped. I mean,
oh no, I'm not stumped.
Time and date, gentlemen.
I'm not stumped. It's that I'm working on specifics in lore that I can't publish at the moment. So what George has said, it covers it perfectly. Don't worry, there will be lore about dwarf feuds.
There better be.
Yes.
Okay,
because some of them drive a lot of adventuring. Because one of the ways that you get out from under a feud, or you redeem yourself, or you heal or try and heal a feud. You remember the old Romeo and Juliet thing where they're trying to join the houses? You know, one of the ways to do that is go adventuring together and do great things together and come back and say, I wouldn't have succeeded except for this dwarf who saved my life. But he's but he saved my life and he's my brother now. You know, you do that thing. So I would, in fullness of time, reveal that lore. But yes, I was trying to keep it short. But I am not stumped. I have a stump, but it's over there. It's underneath ice and snow.
Did you have another one, Curry?
No, it's a personal spin-off of the idea as a whole. I'll let you guys run with it. So, in regards to feuds, Jeff's wife has this ongoing, cash-only, blood-fisted game of Lords of Waterdeep, and she just beats the friggin' chainmail off of all of us. It is ridiculous.
Good to hear.
It's embarrassing. I mean, she has played one, and I mean one, actual D&D session with us. She's read 0 books. She loves and supports everything that we do, but she is the most vicious tabletop dice roller I have ever come across, and she just decimates us with so much passion and laughter. She can't get enough of it. Do you guys play any games like Lords of Waterdeep or tabletops that are maybe realms based at all?
I have to interject, and I've just realised that Jeff has married an avatar of Timora, so that's why he keeps losing.
I will let her know. She will have no idea what that means, but that completely fits.
I have to tell you, at Gamehole Con 2 years ago, Ed, I'm not sure, Ed, you had come in, but I don't remember if you had seen it or not. We were playing with Jeff Grubb and Stephen Shind and
Karen Conlon.
Karen Conley, yes, and I think wasn't Brian Goody there also?
Yes.
Yeah. And so we're playing, and Sharon is winning, and she didn't even know it. We're playing Lords of Waterdeep, and she's ahead by like 30 or 40 spaces, and everybody else had already finished, and she kept going, "Oh, I forgot this. Oh, I forgot this," and Stephen just goes, Sharon, do you have a need to win by more than 30 points? You know?
I find Sharon delightful, and I think it's wonderful that she triumphs in Lords of Waterdeep. Yeah, we play lots of board games here, and some of them are realms related, and some of them are secret realms related because they've never been released. They're our own games, and yes, we play Lords of Waterdeep with a vengeance when we can get people together, because it is a perfect game for non-gamers in that you can play it as a non-conflict game where you just try and build beside each other, not fighting. Yes, you will still play quests on each other, and yes, you will still be in each other's way on spaces on the board, but there's no direct conflict. So people who are comfortable with direct conflict can play the game and really enjoy it. That means, moms, dads, people who are not used to gaming, young kids who might feel intimidated because they're playing with older people. And it works marvelously. It's the great leveler. So yeah, we play Lords of Waterdeep a lot. We love it. And I snuck a scene into the novel Death Masks, my Realms novel, of them playing Lords of Waterdeep.
Yes, I did pick that up.
That's right.
I've only, believe it or not, ever played Lords of Waterdeep online. There's an app for the game, and so I play it against lots of people around the world every so often, and that's always fun. The game I play with my kids especially is the Dungeon, the classic go around the dungeon, kill the monster, get the treasure, and move on. I have the newer version, which is far less extensive. And I have my old copy all the way back to, I think, 1982 or 83, which was a bigger map and more treasure and more monsters and more fun stuff. And I wheel that out every once in a while. It just takes forever to set up, that's all. But it's a great game, and my kids and my wife play it routinely. They love it. They really enjoy it.
And I have a sort of sadness associated with Dungeon because one of the games that Jeff Grubb was called upon as a staff designer to reinvigorate was Dungeon, and this isn't the latest version. There was a version in the middle, but as a volunteer at Gen Con, and I think it was one of the last Milwaukee era Gen Cons, I might be wrong on the timing, they had built a 3D board to cover like a ping pong table type size, which was identical to the game board that you had, except larger and 3D. So that the ones that steps went up and the ramps that went down, and a black background, just like the thing. So, but everything was the same color as on the board, but you could actually see the rise and fall of the dungeon. And I lusted after that board so much. And of course, it's probably long ago destroyed and tossed away after the con. And every time I get out my dungeon, I go, oh, if only we had that board. I
believe Jeff had an opportunity to play that one when it was still in Milwaukee.
Yeah,
yes.
I did.
Yeah. I have to say the game I've always wanted to play, and which only Ed has played, is his famous, never-released Sword Coast Merchant Travel Caravan game.
Yes. That was, I had hoped that would become a freebie game, not freebie, of course, because you had to pay for the issue, but it would be the centerfold game in an issue of Dragon. And Tim Brown was creative director then. I discussed it with him, but it just never got around to happening. And it would be the fold-out board, which would be 4 panels with the staples of the magazines right through the center, would be the Sword Coast. And you would have all the ports, and you would have the shoals and so on, and you could either be merchants or pirates or both. And you would have to deal with piracy, and you have to deal with bad weather, and you would have to deal with large sea monsters coming up from underneath your boat, but you would be carrying cargoes back and forth, which were little cards, and you'd win the game by outpointing in cards. This is not a new idea. It's been used in many board games. Milton Bradley had an old board game called Pirate and Traveler years and years ago that did this sort of thing. But the whole point would be, it would also be a teaching tool. Dungeon masters who didn't want to play the game could plunder its cards to know exactly what cargoes a particular ship would be taking from anywhere to or from. Like, if it's coming into Waterdeep from Baldur's Gate, what is in the hold and why? What gets you the most value for the cargo? What is most wanted? What are the steady flows of bulk cargo going hither and yon? And so therefore, if your player characters want to stow away aboard a ship or pay to be passengers on a ship, or they scramble aboard a ship in an act of piracy in the middle of the night, what's on the ship? It's the old thing, what has he got in his pockets? What has he got in his merchant's wagon? Well,
Right.
These little cards would tell you that, even if you didn't play the game. And it would also be a cool little game. So if you wanted to do, in your role-playing campaign, your Realms role-playing campaign, if you wanted to get on a ship and go up or down the Sword Coast, you would, quote, role-play it by playing a session of this game to see if you got there without pirates or shipwreck or whatever. And if you did, how many days it took. And that would take care of everything. And, of course, we had some of the travel times in the Savage Frontier, FR5, and we had some of them, I think they got chopped out of FR1 Waterdeep in the north, because I kept explaining to TSR, no, Waterdeep is a city, guys. Yeah, you have 64 pages to do Waterdeep in the north. No, the north is bigger than North America, guys. And it's got lots of places that, yeah. And no, I mean, Waterdeep is not the village of Hamlet. It's not 3 buildings. It's a city. and then when...
Right.
Yeah, so lots of things had to be cut off and thrown overboard out of that product, which most of them made it straight into FR5.
Okay, all right. We actually have another question here from Candlekeep, from Zeromaru X. He wants to know. He said he knows that blood magic is a thing in the realms, but how does it work?
Messily.
Thank you. That was going to be my answer too. Messily. Yep. Well, you see, our minds run along similarly depraved grooves. Okay. Blood magic, it establishes a connection with somebody because of their blood in the same way that a true name use establishes a connection with them because you have their true name. And you can also use your own blood to source things and have spells that arise out of it. But it really gives you a tie with someone using blood. Beyond that, the spells can vary quite a bit, and in certain realms products of the past, blood stuff was written out because they said it breaks the code of conduct. We don't want any bodily fluids in a product, and we certainly don't want impressionable kids all over the world cutting themselves or sticking needles in themselves or something to try and do something they read about in a product. So no, blood magic is out. And then in other times we had staff designers saying blood magic must be necromantic. Other people saying, no, it should be an alternative to necromancy. No, it's an integrally part of necromancy. Okay. And therefore, it was quite often left on the cutting room floor. But yes, there is blood magic.
I had played around with the idea of blood magic a long time ago, back in 3rd edition days, and still have a little half-formed article that I was going to pitch to Dragon, but of course never got a chance to, with it going defunct for a while and then becoming in-house. And what I was thinking of back in 3rd edition terms was to use blood magic for the sorcerer class, and use that in the context of the meta magic feats. And instead of having to use spell levels to boost a spell, as you used to have to do, instead you would sacrifice hit points. So your empowered, extended, silent, quickened fireball might cost you 10 hit points or 12 hit points. But it fed into the things we'd seen in Ed's novels, and specifically about how sometimes these blood magics were used in extremis. They were used as a last resort. They were used because you were desperate and had no other option. And I thought that sort of concept fit in well with the use of meta magic feats for spellcasters. The best blood magic that I recall is from Ed's novel Elminster in Hell, when the symbol brings forth her blood ring, which is bits of her blood that she's put into various creatures over the years that she's not slain, being a dragon, a beholder,
right.
Various, a red wizard, a Zentarum wizard, and they all out of nowhere pop into the hells. And some of them die very quickly, but it's a fantastic scene. One of my favourites from that novel.
It is. I remember that scene. Yeah.
When they all arrive in hell in Avernus, and all of a sudden have to stave off these hordes of devils that are just attacking everywhere. Just brilliant. But that's again a magic, a great magic that is used in extremis in a desperate circumstance. It's not something that you use every day. My thoughts on blood magic are that's the way it would probably be used. It's not a day in, day out thing. It's not like memorizing your spells. It's not like getting your potions and scrolls in the right containers. So in terms of gaming utility, it's probably got a very narrow window in terms of most people's gaming experience.
Makes absolute sense. Curry, I think we have another question by Spark Murphy. We haven't heard from him in quite a while.
Oh yeah, Lord Scribe Spike Murphy. It says here, is the information of Evermeet and the first sundering related to the creation of the Raven Queen and her attempt to return her people to Arvindor? He goes on to comment about the ritual being sabotaged by the soon-to-be... I think I already covered this one, didn't I, guys? Did I ask this one? No, I didn't. I'm sorry.
No, we haven't.
The ritual being covered by the soon-to-be Nagba dovetails nicely with the world-changing effects of the Sundering, and a chunk of the Arvindor being carved off and becoming Evermeet instead of opening a gateway to Arvindor fits the narrative of both the Sundering and the Raven Queen pretty well. George, you want to spin off of that one?
Well, who is this Raven Queen in the realm? The Raven Queen was a creation of, she was brought into the core of 3rd edition, was it perhaps? But I can't recall whether it was 3rd or 4th edition that featured the Raven Queen as a deity. But there's been many attempts that I've seen from fans all around to bind her into the realms, and who might she be in the realms, and how would she have connections with the realms. I'm not sure there's a hard and fast answer to that unless Ed's got one under his hat. But the interesting thing about the Sundering, including the Elven Sundering, is that we have to understand that these Sunderings are where Toril and Abir come together and move apart. And in long ago Secret Realms lore, when the Sundering concept for 4th edition was talked about, a few of us lore masters got together and discussed what exactly that meant, what those connections between Abir and Toril over the millennia had wrought on each of those particular entities. And my favourite was always the big fungus, as I like to, the Aramikos underneath the high forest. And I always thought, well, that's a bit far realmy, even though I have my views in relation to the far realm and what it means to the Forgotten Realms. But I always thought that Aramikos came to the realms through one of these connections between these conjunctions between Toril and Abir. And similarly, obviously, what that means is just like Timantha that we touched on before, many things that have occur in the realms and have been introduced in the realms have come across because of these conjunctions, because of these crossings between these entities, and that also includes the Earth. Let's not forget that there are elements of the Earth in the realms that other designers have introduced, the old empires and the deities that are clearly from the Egyptian and the Babylonian and Assyrian pantheons. And the way some of Chesenta has been portrayed as having a Greco-Roman aspect to it. I've always thought the best explanation to that is that there have been times, as Ed has always said, where the realms, Toril has intersected with the Earth and things have happened. The Raven Queen, to get back to her, is an interesting entity. Well, is there a connection between her and the Evermeet, the creation of Evermeet? I'm not sure. The creation of Evermeet is one of those things in the distant past of the realms that we know something about, but we actually don't know very much about. It's one of the great mysteries of the realms as to how exactly that happened. And if you read Elaine's wonderful Evermeet novel, the protagonists who brought Evermeet to the realms didn't themselves understand exactly what they'd done or how they'd done it. They knew they used time magic to do something, but the end result was, I think, a surprise and very different from what they expected.
Ed, do you have anything to add to that?
Yes, but it's not much that will be of use to Mr. Murphy or the rest of us. To answer his question specifically, both of them, seeing the connection between Amalurul's disappearance and the Raven Queen, and the formation of Evermeet and the first Sundering related to the creation of the Raven Queen, and her attempt to return her people to Arvandor, both of those are NDA, which in itself should tell you something.
Possibilities in the near future?
I don't think so, just because of how things have turned out in terms of publishing and the way the Realms is being presented and the changes and additions and everything. I don't think it's publication in the near future, but...
What about the DM's Guild? And actually, Ed, I have a question here. My wife just got home, and she's too embarrassed to ask you herself.
Hi, Jerry.
I'll tell you said hi. She gave me my coffee and then snuck out very, very shyly. She's been listening to the podcast, and she asked me the other day. She said, "How?" She's a psychologist, and I guess in her thinking, 5-year-old kids aren't sitting down writing stories about Mert the moneylender.
Yes, they are.
Being chased by the police, the local authorities. She's just what would she have seen? What kind of, what would she have seen as you're sitting there writing and putting these stories down? What kind of child were you at 5 years old?
That's a fascinating question, because my mom died when I was 6. Okay, my mom died of cancer, breast cancer. In those days, they treated breast cancer with what they called the cobalt bomb, which was a hard radiation thing.
Right.
But my mom happened to be pregnant with my younger sister, and because the doctors told her, if you have this radiation, it will kill the baby 100% certainty. And she said, well, let's wait until after I've given birth, and I'll take my chances. Which was, in the end, the right choice for Adrian, the wrong choice for my mom, if you see what I mean.
Right.
I was the oldest. I suppose I'd be what you'd call a child prodigy. I was reading very young. I was reading everything in my father's den. My father, the porn of my father's age was not the porn of today. we're talking like pulp novels. The Nude Said No. So I spent, the rest of my life searching for The Nude Said Yes and never found it.
Right.
And westerns that Owl Hoot Trail, she was staked out nude in the sun to die. And there's a picture of this woman staked out on the cover, and the whole center, where all the fun bits would be, is the title and the author's name and the little blurb that says she was staked out. So and then you read the book, and that scene is alluded to in one paragraph and never described.
Okay.
So we're talking, the sort of hardcore porn that's known as Peyton Place and stuff like that, and
Right.
Forever Amber. By today's standards, it's like, what? But the point is I was reading everything, and there was everything in there, from heavy-duty radio physics documents to the worst sort of pulp garbage and everything in between. And I didn't care. I read it all. And I was like doing more adventuring in those worlds because I was a shy nerd. I was incredibly shy. I got bullied a lot. So that was my world. And yeah, I was writing stuff like that because I was pastiching authors I was reading. And I was reading everything from Harold Lamb and Raphael de Sabatini to Lord Dunsany, all the stuff. My dad had it all. I was reading Lord of the Rings. I was reading war novels. And so that was why at age 4 and 5, I was not only enjoying kids' picture books from the library, I was going upstairs and picking adult books for me, and the librarians thought I was carrying them for my mom and dad. Wasn't that cute? And I was reading them for me.
Right.
So yeah, I was writing stuff at age 5. I was doing all that stuff at age 5. I wrote my first novel. It was called Fool's Master. I think I was 9 years old when it was finished. By the time I was hitting junior high school, I was, writing articles for everybody, and I was starting to write for Dragon regularly and supporting myself through universities. So, it was like I was always writing, and I was always reading, and I was always asking my father, who had traveled a lot around the world doing stuff, what things were like, and he would trot out a National Geographic. And by the way, my dad's National Geographics went back to the beginning when there were nothing on the cover except a list of the table of contents, and he had all the wartime National Geographics that were talking about war in the Pacific Theater as it was happening. So the photographs in the National Geographic that month were of damage on this aircraft carrier and crashed. It was like, wow.
Yeah. Really?
And all his old Popular Science and Popular Mechanics magazines with the Roy Doty cartoons, and these every 3 years they ran a cover story about how your car will have wings and you'll take off from your own driveway and your commute will be fast because you'll get downtown and just land in the parking lot.
Right.
And they would run that stuff over and over again, and I read all that. It's fascinating to read, and unfortunately not all of it has survived since my father's death, because there were like many garbage scows of stuff that had to be cleared away, and there were many things that were given away. My dad kept vacuum tubes, thousands of vacuum tubes. Yes. All sorts of stuff. But I was surrounded by this stuff. I was immersed. I had 2 parents who were writers. They were both academics. They were both teachers, and they were both pursuing projects at all times. Like they would get interested in the Easter Island statues or something, and then they would bring in books from the library and they would read up on it, and they would interlibrary loan books, and then they would order books from the bookstore and follow it, and Stonehenge was one of my father's interests, and I would just pick up and read everything that he was, he'd finish reading it and he'd dump it on a pile. Well, he'd dump it on a pile in his den. His den was where we all had to go for piano practice. So I got very good at playing one-handed while reading a book with the other hand. And I would read all this stuff. So I was constantly, that was growing up to me. I didn't have, yes, I had friends and we went and played in the ravines, and it was the era where your parents would lock you out of the house. Come back at supper time. Doors locked until then. Get out and get some fresh air.
Right. I think all of us grew up like that.
Yeah, so we would go with our chests. We would go wearing a jacket. Have you got your jacket? You don't want to get cold. What if it starts raining? Well, we didn't put on the jacket because we cared about getting cold. We put on the jacket because we put 6 or 7 books in our chest, zipped the jacket over them, clasp our hands together underneath them to keep them from falling out the bottom, And say, yeah, I'm just going over to play with so-and-so. Good. Be back at supper time. The door won't be open until then. And we go off to the ravine, find a nice place, and we'd sit and read. And then we talk about things. As Roger Zelazny's Amber books came out, we would devour each new one, but we would wait and reread all the previous ones up until that new one. And then we'd say, I wonder who did that. I wonder who was hiding behind that. I wonder who daggered so-and-so. Wow, we'll never know for another, So we discussed the books. We discussed all the stuff behind the Lord of the Rings, the stuff in the appendices. We never found out the names of those two wizards who went east beyond Rune. Where did they go? What did they do? What other lands were there? You see, we were always dissecting, and so that was... So if Sharon wants to know, was I crazy as a kid? Yeah, I'm crazy now, too. I'm good at it. I've had 59 years of honing my insanity. I'm good at it.
I think she was just trying to diagnose you. That's what she wanted to know.
I lived in a fantasy world that was firmly anchored in the real world because I had grandparents who'd lived through 2 world wars and a depression and had grown up on farms. And so they were all about practical things. Like, Eddie, please take this and pick every dandelion on the front lawn. And we had like an 1.5 acre front lawn.
Oh, wow.
Because I want to put them in a salad.
Dandelion salad, yeah.
Yeah, dandelion salad. I mean, so you had that contrasted with, now I'm reading books and I'm asking my father what all the Latin words are. And he's saying, oh, God. Every Latin word. And then he'd say, wait a minute. And he'd go and he'd find a book on Latin and say, read this. Meaning, don't ask me any more stupid questions until you've read that and memorized it all.
Go teach yourself Latin, right?
Go teach yourself Latin. That I will hold a little shaver for 2 hours.
Oh my God. Well, she'll appreciate the answer, I think, even though she's too embarrassed to ask it herself. But
oh, she can ask me anything. It's me.
I know, but she's still been around you for a couple of times, so.
And I am scary. Yes, I understand.
She doesn't mind the dirty old man part, and the rest of it scares her. So.
Hey, not so much of the man.
Curry, I think there's another question from someone at Candlekeep.
Oh boy, this is a doozy too. Let me see if I can get through this without mispronouncing every third word. Okay, so Saravan asks, makes a comment about how amazing it must be to have other creative people work inside your world. Who are among your favorite creations, and this is in terms of characters or even bits of lore that are created by other authors or creators in the realms, and they're particularly interested in your favorites from the 80s and 90s era characters or concepts.
That's a hard one because it's like saying who's your favorite child of your children,
Well, yeah, of course.
I think my favorites have to do with the friends I've made who've worked on the realms and the delight of watching them at work. So it comes down to 2 sorts of people. George Krashos and Eric Boyd, who made a career of explaining away inconsistencies and difficulties in the published lore in ways that expanded and improved on the lore over and over again. And I would just chortle and go, that's perfect! Or, oh, that's wonderful! And that happened again and again. So they were they were taking the tapestry that creators working completely independently had smashed into each other or overrun each other or contradict each other, and they would just fix that bit, and it worked better. I also loved it when I got to work directly with Jeff Grubb, and we did Cormyr, a novel, and cobbled together the back history of Cormyr. That was just a delight to do, and it's been a delight with everybody involved. George Krashos again, but Brian Corteo and all sorts of people in the past, Grant Christie and so on, who worked on the timeline of Cormyr, and how we, although that sort of comes and goes in our progress on it, how we've built on that and how everybody's had a chance. And I've watched in this sort of 3-way conversation where Erin Evans would be at work in Cormyr in her recent novels, and Brian would be talking in her ear, and I'd be talking in her ear, and we'd go back and forth about it, and then she would say, okay, So if they had small plants that they were going to find outside their tent, what would it be? Or so what would the attitude of this person be? And we just, oh, good. And that's when it's the most fun to rush in and sort of help, but not dictate or railroad. Just sort of say, this is here if you need it. And we can give you some names here if you want them, but you don't have to use them, and that sort of stuff. And that has happened over and over again. It was also fun to see various people spread their wings and add stuff to the realms. I love what Bob did in Homeland, bringing Menzo to life. And I was absolutely blown away when I read the manuscript of Elaine's first novel, Elf Shadow, and she was doing Erlen and Danilo and bringing Waterdeep to life through their eyes and looking over their shoulders. And I was going, it's perfect. This woman's been inside my head. This is it, So those are some of my favorites. Over the years, what is my favorite has morphed to what can you add to the realms without screwing up what's already there, And when I got to do that work on that series of novels, in which Susan Morris, by the way, did all the real heavy lifting of editing, and they shoved my name on the front of them, Ed Greenwood Presents or whatever they were, the novel set in Waterdeep. And it was a delight to read The Godcatcher. It was a delight to read The City of the Dead. It was a delight to read Eric Scott DeBee's novel and get not only the hilarious scenes with all the woman in the Paladin's digs, but also seeing Fox in Twilight, and coming to life. James P. Davis did a much darker, creepier novel. It was fun to read all those novels, and they were like showing different facets of the city and bringing them to life. So I love that sort of stuff. I just wish there could have been a lot more of it.
I think all of us do.
Yeah, and
That's right.
Over the years, and watching Bob Salvatore, his characters take on a life that it means we could sit down and he could tell me, or he could tell a room full of people, and he did this for the summit when we were doing the Sundering. He could say what was going to be in the next few books, and he was talking about it in a way that wasn't armies marching and big events in the realms. He was talking about it as you would talk about a soap opera or a sitcom, where it's, here's what happens next for this character, and this character will come to loggerheads with that character, and as we know, this character is working to, and it was all about what will happen next for the characters. And I would just sit back with a big smile on my face, because the realms was coming alive, and it was a bit of the realms that I didn't do. It's something added by somebody else. The same way I used to enjoy it when Chris Perkins was doing all those dungeon adventures, when he was editing Dungeon, and he would occasionally do stuff that was set in the realms, and it would like come to life, and I'd say, oh, that's wonderful, and which is one of the reasons I am so pleased with the current gang, even though I'm not going down to see them every year the way I did in the old TSR days. The current creative team that is doing D&D books, and therefore, up until Ravnica, Realms books, I'm so delighted to see what they do. Now, they are facing the problem that all game designers face. Somebody's going to hate whatever you put on the page, and there's never enough word count to put everything in the product. Ever.
Right.
So you always have to leave something else, and somebody always says, hey, where's my 15 side adventures? And you go, do you see any extra pages they could have put them on? But
Right.
But I mean, so somebody will always say, but you could have spent more time. Yeah, you could have, but you had to leave something else out. So I'm also delighted in seeing what's being done. So, but favorites is a strong word. These are the things that have lit my fire the most when I've read them or played them and come across them the first time. What moves me the most is when I meet people at conventions or signings or whatever for whom the realms really means something personally, and it has helped their life, or it has helped them through a bad period in their life, or has helped them over the death of a loved one, or it has led them into a marriage. And and you think, wow, those are just squiggles of ink on paper. The shaped squiggles of ink that we all read and interpret in our brains to have meaning, and it's all imaginary. We make all this stuff up, and it's improved somebody's life. Wow!
Right.
Anyway.
Curry, we got another portion of that question.
We get a couple. Well, I'll see if I can get through them. The next one is kind of like a wish list style question. How would we ever be able to get a Volo's Guide to Moonsea produced? he says that he'd sponsor it himself if there was a way. Would the DMs Guild ever be a format to get such a work done via like a Pantheon or Kickstarter or crowdfunder? Is that even viable, Ed?
The only legal avenue for publishing such a thing, aside from it being done officially by Wizards of the Coast or officially by a formal license, an outside license, would be to do it at DM's Guild. That's the only legal channel. I have some ideas of things to do, but there's only one of me, and I have a shopping list of things to do that is as long as both my arms. Volo's Guide to the Moonsea was a canceled product back in the TSR days, and by that I do not mean that it was written and then dropped off the schedule. It was one of the things that was put on the schedule and fell off, put on the schedule and fell off, put on the schedule and fell off. There are about another 8 Volo's regional guides, geographical areas in Toril, that we wanted to do and I wanted to get around to, and I would dearly love to do. And I am at work on something for Dungeon Masters Guild in the far future. I hoped it would be the near future, but life is happening and pushing it farther and farther. But yeah, you will see Volo again. Let's put it that way.
That was a whole lot of words for George. Buddy, this one's on you.
Are we talking about the DM's Guild products and things like that?
Oh, as far as this particular guide, I mean, this would be a perfect opportunity. I think anyway.
Oh, absolutely. Now, I can think of a couple of people that could probably help.
I love the Moonsea, and I've got lots of information about the Moonsea, but there are lots of people who have written about the ancient history of the Moonsea. The James brothers in their Monument of the Ancients Dragon magazine or Dungeon magazine adventure had some magnificent background detail for the Moonsea in terms of its history. And the difficult question is, we loved the Volo's guides when they all came out, but they were all set around the 1370 Dale Reckoning realms. A Volo's Guide to the Moonsea now published at the DM's Guild, you'd have to make that tough decision, wouldn't you? Do you follow the other sequence and set it in the 1370s pre-spell plague realms, or do you set it in the 1480s and 90s? And the difficulty with that, of course, is everything has changed so much that you would effectively be rewriting everything from scratch. You've still got most of the locations, but you've got to populate them with people and power groups and leaders and intrigues, and that's never easy. As Ed says, there's only so much time in the day. I had tinkered a long time ago with doing a Volo's Guide to Impulter and doing it on the DM's Guild. I've moved away from that because I'm thinking one day, fingers crossed, I'd love to do a full Impulter source book for the DM's Guild. And that's the dream. And I have lots and lots of stuff on Impulter. The history that's already on the DM's Guild is complete up until the 1370s. There are lots of my sword articles which provide a bit of historical background and other stories for the realms. And there's lots of information I've provided over the years at Candlekeep, which if you put all together gives you a fair idea of a 1370s Impulter. The question would be, do I update Impulter for the 5th edition realms in the terms of the timeline? Would it suit people better in the 1400s, or would they be just as happy to play Impulter in the 1370s if they got a source book? So those are difficult decisions, but I'm confident that in the distant future, as Ed said, there will be an Impulter product that I will release on the DM's Guild. But I must say, I've got another secret project I'm working on quite hard at the moment in conjunction with Eric Boyd, and similarly I've got my own big project which I'm working on, which is quite a while away from coming to fruition, but it's coming along slowly but surely.
No hint.
Mysteries of the realms.
Mysteries of the realms.
All right. So I'll round this one out, and you guys can fight over who wants to answer this final part. But it is in your realms style question. So your version, your take. What has become of Nergoth Bladelord and Salvarad and Zilvrine from the Cerlunian cult leadership?
The cult of the dragon. In my realms, again, this is a pre-spell play question because I'm not sure we know much about them after the spell play. In my realms, when Shade came and Voltanthar effectively took over Sembia, their cute and cozy little arrangement in Saloon dissolved and they had to flee. And the question is, where have they gone? And I think they've moved in my realms. They've moved into the Dragon Coast region, which is more lawless and for a period of time. And then, of course, Cormier, doing what it did, effectively took control over the Dragon Coast region, and so they had to move again. And so they moved into that kind of in-between area between Tethir and the Sword Coast and the realms of Termish and the Dragon Coast. So they're effectively building a power base in the wilderness where they can avoid big power groups in areas of power, so they can try and build up their power base and serve the dead dragons, which is, of course, their guiding light.
That's a great answer.
And I would see them doing the exact same thing. In the Home Realms campaign, we're still back at that time, pre-Spell Plague, and none of that has happened yet. But if I was taking it from where we are right now in the Home Realms campaign and moving towards the 1490s DR, where the published Realms is now for 5th edition, everything that George just said happening, I would see it happening the same way. Them getting pushed out of Sembia, then getting pushed again and again, and then moving away from powerful civilized rulers to do their own thing and build up again. And of course the other thing is, they're always seeking new dragons to convert. And that could take them all over Faerun. Could take them all over Toro.
Would we ever see a joint effort between the Cult of the Dragon and the Red Wizards of Thay?
Ooh.
Yeah. They get pushed out of Sembia across the sea.
I could see that sort of alliance happening only if each side could think they were using the other.
Right.
We have to understand that Thay isn't what it used to be. It's now a dictatorship.
Yes.
Sastam, the great Sastam, has a realm full of undead and some humans who I think suffers to live there. It appears from the Realms Law that's been released, the brief Realms Law, that he's created his own Council of Zolkirs. And going back to the mention of that article on Thay that I wrote with Ed's significant help for the DM's Guild, we have to understand what Zolkirs originally were. The Zolkirs were the lieutenants of the great Archmage Thade, who led the rebellion against the old empires. And what they were they were underlings, they were lieutenants, they were trusted wizards that acted as the first port of call before they got to the big guy. And I think Sastam has done exactly the same thing. He's formed his own Zolkirs, who are his own underlings. They're not the rulers of Thay like they used to be. They control the small things while he deals with the big things like taking over the world. But what Sastam's takeover of Thay has meant is there is many renegade red wizards who have flooded into Faerun. Many of them haven't survived, obviously. They've been the enemies of lots of nations and other power groups for centuries, and so they've probably been picked off. But I think many have thrived in shadowy areas and aligned themselves with different organisations. And I could see that several renegade red wizards of Thay might have joined up with the Cult of the Dragon and perhaps give lip service to their purpose and cause whilst doing what they need to do to survive.
Agreed. Yeah.
Agreed, okay.
George and I think about the realms in the same way, so we're usually ending up on the same page. Yeah, we're going, yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's exactly what would happen. Yeah.
The man with two brains, right?
No.
Well, when Eric and Stephen join, it becomes the man with 4 brains, so it's not too bad.
There you go.
And the beer consumption goes up markedly.
Oh my God, that's true.
Markedly.
That's what you get when you have those Wisconsinites sitting around a table together.
You got to wash that cheese down with something, or it just bungs up your entire system.
cleansing properties of alcohol.
Yeah. It's medicinal. It's medicinal. Honest.
I feel my rheumatism acting up. That's right.
Yeah.
Okay, so I have another question here from. I'll let you guess who it is. Spike Murphy.
We love you, Spike. We love you.
Absolutely. I may jest at him, but no, his questions are absolutely fantastic.
Oh no! Next week, we're inviting this guy to run this podcast. It's going to be his show, and by next month, we're going to have nothing to do with this at all.
The truth be told, he couldn't do a worse job, could he? So that's so that's a bit of Australian humour there for you all.
Very little, I'll show you. We love you, George. It's okay.
Yeah.
So, and he asked, what can Ed add to what's known about Thard Har and the jungle dwarves of Chult? It says the wild dwarves in the jungle, not the albino volcano dwellers from the Tomb of Annihilation.
Okay, well, Thard Har is estranged from all the other dwarven deities at the moment because he has a different vision for the race of dwarves. He believes dwarves will thrive living on the surface, farming and harvesting wild plants, rather than mining metals and delving underground. And this is such a departure from what dwarves are and should be, and what dwarves stand for in the eyes of the other deities, the dwarven deities, that they deem Thard Har, quote, not a dwarf. For his part, Thard Har deems them not sane, as in willfully blind to reality. In other words, he thinks you've led the dwarven race down the wrong path. It can only go to dwindling extinction. Look what's happening. You know, this is not, it doesn't matter whether you had the best of intentions, it's not working. Look where it's going.
Right.
And they're saying, yes, but this is what it is to be a dwarf. What you're talking about would mean we were no longer dwarves anymore. I don't know what we'd be, but we wouldn't be dwarves, sort of thing. And so they're parting their way. And that's what I see things standing at right now. Now, it doesn't mean that there are tons and tons of dwarves who revere and obey Thard Har. There are some, mainly the jungle dwarves of Chult. There are a few dwarves all over Faerun on the surface who secretly think, you know, this god is onto something. You know, maybe we should take this path. And of course, that's awfully easy a decision to make if you were kicked out by your own clan elders, or if you just can't see ever achieving anything if you go back home, because there are all these old graybeards, and they're so much wiser than you, and so much older than you, and so much richer than you,
right.
And so much established in their power structures, and there's no room for you in them, except under their feet. Anyway.
So he also said personally he thinks there's a relationship between Thard Har and the Durgar. Is it possible that they were once his people before the Illithids lured them away and enslaved them?
It is possible, but unlikely, and no dwarf alive today knows the truth. And if Thard Har knows the truth, he isn't saying. In other words, go ahead.
So in the realms, we know that the Duergar were a part of the realm of Xanatar, and that they were cut off from the other sub-kingdoms of Xanatar and enslaved by the Illithids. And so what happened, of course, was that they developed a hate for their kindred simply because they felt they were abandoned by their brethren. They weren't supported by the other clans. No one came to save them from the mind flayers that took them over as a race and did very, very bad things to them. And that's the start of the animosity between the Duergar and the dwarves. What's interesting in that thing is that there were 8 sub-kingdoms of the dwarves, and it's unclear. Each of them had a particular deity that was for each of those sub-kingdoms of Xanatar, and it appears that Thard Har might have been one of them when he was still a subterranean dwarven deity like the rest, and that in that dissolution of that ancient kingdom, what happened then was that effectively his worshippers took another route and fled the area and moved into the place they are now. That's what it appears happened. So just like the Duergar, they weren't happy with the normal status quo in terms of the way dwarven kingdoms would operate, etc., and they forged out on their own. And one can only imagine that there was some great prophet or some great religious leader of the dwarves who worshipped him, who took them in a different direction. That sounds like a great story for someone in the future.
No, absolutely. So I guess, and he was also thinking that it was more of a self-imposed exile from the Morden Shaman that Thard Har had done. But it was actually the entire pantheon of dwarves that rejected him.
I'm not sure it was a rejection per se. I think it was more that he decided to move on himself and decided that there was a different way forward for the dwarves. And just looking at the realms law, we're aware of the 8 sub-kingdoms of Xanatar were all part of a greater whole, obviously. And it might have been that his worship and religion was slightly different from everyone else, even in those early days. And maybe they weren't part of a sub-kingdom. Maybe they were a subgroup of every other sub-kingdom, feeling somewhat ostracized for saying, hey, what are we doing here? And then, of course, they created High Xanatar, where they went to the surface. And I'm thinking that's probably when his worshippers left the deep sub-kingdoms and moved to High Xanatar, which appears to have been a very different dwarven kingdom. And they realized that there was a life on the surface, away from the mining and the caverns and the fighting against the perils of the Underdark. Of course meant that there were perils at the surface, which were just as bad and just as difficult to deal with. But I think it took his worshippers in a different direction. And then, of course, when High Xanatar fell, that might have been when the dwarves that worshipped him had to go and moved away and travelled ways to get them to where we've seen them now in near the jungles of Chult.
Speaking of Chult, another part of a question earlier that we didn't get to from Spike. Is there any place that is a repository for the sort of Neblin culture akin to how the wild dwarves of Chult have their sole temple on top of the fire peaks that has the only written pictorial information of the Church of Thard Har?
I don't think so.
Okay.
I don't think that's the style for Thard Har.
I was going to say, it doesn't sound like he would be someone who would want massive temples with his visage all over them. But that's not to say that dwarves haven't thought that's what he might need or want. The ways of gods are inscrutable, sometimes because we have so much information about the gods of the Forgotten Realms. We tend to treat them like people, and they're not people. Their aims and intentions, unless they're absolutely clearly articulated, and even then by difficult means, dream visions, signs, things like that. They come down to mortal, and trying to understand what their particular deity wants. So that temple structure might have been something that someone thought, a great worshipper of his, he wanted, but that's not necessarily what he did or didn't want, I think. Gods are mysterious. In my realms, they always are. They're not humans. They're not people. They're not mortals. Their ways and why they do things in my realms have to be mysterious. That makes them what the power they are in my realms and my campaigns.
Agreed. Yes, very much agree.
And Curry, I think we have a question from somebody not Spike Lee or Spike Murphy.
Spike, now that would be fun. Spike Lee showing up on the question list. That'd be great. Okay, so this one, this is a different kind of question that we normally kick around. Matt Barr asks, are there any, or what are the biggest regrets you may have in regards to forwarding Realms lore? And he expounds on that by going forward with something that was a bad idea, or not going forward with something that was a good idea. This can be in both gaming, novel related. Also, part B of this is any series on the novels side of things, or other, or older, or new, that you would like to have seen continued or expounded on by any other author that was not either because of an overarching Realm story, the storyline moved forward too quickly, or because the Realms novel was then canceled, didn't go anywhere, rest in peace, it just didn't move.
Okay, well, the general things are, I always, even though the TSR intended from the first that the realms should be the unified game world for the second edition of the games. So they knew at the beginning, because it was in Jeff's position paper, which was an internal document at TSR, when he was advocating they get this world. They needed a world to have Oriental adventures, Arabian adventures, jungle adventures, pirate adventures, Arctic adventure, all the things. It would had to be all things to all men, unquote. And I always think it's a problem when you have too close real-world analogs in the realms. I realize that
Sure.
People need that as a shorthand, particularly if they're not familiar with the realms. And I see gamers asking, so what's Tethyer based on? What's Chult based on? And they're looking for something from real-world history or from Hollywood or something so they can understand that area of the realms. I get that. And of course, when TSR and later Wizards of the Coast, when they're licensing it to outside firms who may or may not be avid gamers and D&D players and may or may not know the realms, that's also a useful shorthand for them. But I always think it is a mistake in style. I didn't want, quote, my realms to be too close to the real world realms because, as I've said in an earlier on one of our earlier interviews, I don't want somebody saying, but they didn't invent the stirrup until da-da-da, so da-da-da, and I don't want that real-world stuff to take us out of our role-playing. So that's always a mistake. In terms of the novels, I have had endless regrets when we moved on from something and didn't get to do something else. And of course, the huge time jump is the biggest regret because a whole bunch of human characters, unless we did superhuman subterfuges to keep them alive. Hello, Mert.
I love the idea he pops up out of a sword. That was so great.
I am in you. No.
Yeah, I know it wouldn't take long, and there it is.
Oh, yeah, there you go.
We've been good for so long.
Yes, it's killing us in here. But no, unless you do superhuman things like that, most of your human characters are going to be dead of old age from the century time jump, which meant a lot of things got left on the table. Characters we couldn't see more of. We couldn't see what happens next. That has always been my regret for the realms because, of course, I'm bringing in a cast of thousands and one or two get concentrated on and we pick up and run with them. And if they're popular, hello Drist, then we get more and more and more, and that means there's not a publishing slot being left unused for something else, which meant we didn't get to see entire cultures, entire areas didn't get seen. I know, for one, just to pick one off the top of my head, Brian Cortio wanted to do lots of Cormier novels. So did I. He wanted to do court intrigue, and stuff to do with ruling the kingdom. I wanted to do a lot more. So here we are, the nobles. We really don't care what idiot is wearing the crown as long as he sticks out of our hair. Because we've got all of these old... And I wanted to write tons of novels like that. I wanted tons of novels on the nobles of Waterdeep. I wanted tons of novels on what it's like to live as a shoeshine boy or a shopkeeper in Waterdeep. One of the things that we originally intended for the realms that we mentioned, I mentioned this earlier, I was supposed to do a series of novels at the beginning that would show us everybody across the realms, all sorts of different cultures, all sorts of different people, and then other writers would step in, pick those characters up, and write series about them. And that, because the thinking changed, the philosophy changed, and the personnel changed in book department, all of them happening together, that plan just got tossed away or forgotten, or the new people didn't know about it. I don't know which, because I wasn't a staffer. I don't know what the inside scoop on that was, but that never happened. So that is also a regret, because we could have had a far broader based realms from the beginning, with far more diverse cast of characters, both in cultures, races, and by races I don't mean black and white or anything, I mean human and other. We could have had dwarf novels, a whole line of them. We could have had gnome novels, halfling novels. Yeah, I wanted all that.
Could you just say that again? We could have had dwarf novels? That was a real thing? Because you know what, Ed? We could have had dwarf novels.
We could have had. We could have been contenders. No, but the point is, there are many regrets, but the many regrets are the same thing I'm facing now when you asked me earlier about what I was working on and when could we see this or could we do a new Volos guide. You only have so much time in your life. Time is the commodity. It's not money so much, although if you don't have enough money to feed yourself or shelter yourself, Yeah, that becomes paramount. But once you've got that taken care of, time is your commodity. Spending the time on stuff. You never have enough time left in your life to do all the things you want to do. So things have to be left to the back burner. And you know when you put things on the back burner that some of them are never going to happen. Unless you can let go and let other people do them. That's why I sold the realms. I knew I couldn't do it all. And I wanted to see what other people would do with it. But you see, the thing is, once it's owned by a publisher and they have finite resources, there's only a limited number of product slots, and so the same thing is going to happen with them. TSR used to have this thing called the St. Valentine's Day Massacre, obviously based on the real-life gangster incident, but what it meant is every person who was putting products, they would put products on a hypothetical schedule, and of course, around Valentine's Day every year, the management would look at the money they had, the press time, the paper they could scrape together, and they would line up the products all against a wall and shoot some of them, take them off the schedule, and the rest would survive. The Elves of Evermeet was one product that fell off the schedule 3 or 4 times. Spellbound, I think, fell off once or twice, and then in a later year went on. You see, so that happens with everybody. And I have many regrets. I think that your Realms novel collection should be about 6,000 novels strong. They should all be leather bound with gilt edges. They should all have cloth markers.
Absolutely.
They should come with free bookshelves sized to fit them that are hand delivered to your home. And if the floors need shoring up to put the shelves in, the workers who deliver them should also shore up your floors. But this is why I don't run gaming companies and shouldn't run publishing companies, because me and the real world have this nodding acquaintance that we wave at each other as we
I just had this sudden vision of a butler coming out from your library saying, "Well, sir, I have chosen you this delightful walk along this old coast. I think you might enjoy it tonight."
and I would say, "But I was so looking forward to that salacious little drow scene." And then the butler says, "Yes, sir. Unfortunately, the floor, sir. That bookshelf is now 3 floors down, sir. And we're out of rope, sir, until tomorrow."
Or he says, "I'm still cleaning myself from the last one."
Okay, well...
Okay, anyway, moving along.
Yeah. Moving along uneasily with the lube, yes.
So I have a question from Slavis, our old friend Slavis, who's been around at Candlekeep, good God, for like 20 years.
Jeff, can I butt in? Can I just add something to that last question?
Yeah.
In terms of the things that we would have liked to have seen continued or done more of by an author, my one biggest item on the wish list was always seeing the end of the Aralyn Danilo career trajectory.
Yeah.
To see Elaine Cunningham's Reclamation and all the other novels that she had planned to give us more about Elaith Cronenberg and all of those wonderful characters that she didn't necessarily always create, but she brought to life. And so that's always been one of the things that I so wished had been published. Elaine, many years ago on Candlekeep, published a few snippets from her various novels that had never been finished or come to fruition, and they were just brilliant, absolutely stunning prose. And
yes.
To this day, I just wish that somehow they had managed to be finished and completed. When I win the lottery and I have millions of dollars to spare, I'll give her a call and say, "Time to start writing. Get them done."
Yeah, we'll make a pact right here and now. We win the lottery. We'll just combine our money and purchase the rights back.
That's a great idea.
I think so too.
You realize we would have to do a takeover of Hasbro, so it better be a lot of money.
Yeah, it's only a small percentage of their yearly income. So.
Okay.
We'll state a business case so they can't refuse.
There you go. That's right. So, Slavis wants to know if you can officially name all of the unknown continents for us from the scholar's view of Ebir Toril. Either one of you.
The answer to that for me is no, because they're NDA. You have asked something that is deliberately and specifically NDA. What I can tell you because the question referenced the scholar's view of the pictorial map that Marcus Day did. I can tell you that on that map, the lands that we know are accurately portrayed. Malatra is accurately positioned in terms of its relation with the others. And Orun is indeed a continent. I can confirm that. Beyond that, I look at that map and I go, I'm not allowed to talk about any of this stuff. However, George labors under no such restrictions.
George, so turning to you, our last hope. Help us, Obi-Wan Kenobi, your only hope.
Well, the problem with me helping out is that I would be just making stuff up.
Isn't that what we do anyway?
Well, yeah, it is. It is to a degree, but the problem with making things like that up, and I can't stress this enough to the fans of the Forgotten Realms, is that your own answers are just as wonderful and valid as anyone else's. What you create and what you put into the realms, and the people you come up with, and the places you come up with, and the names you give to 10 different weeds of Tethir or whatever, are wonderful things that just add to the foundations and the firmament of the realms. So it's really important sometimes not to want all the answers and just have a lot of questions. Sometimes you coming up with the answers yourself, and then that inspiring you to write more and to do more. It's how the realms lives and will continue to live, and that will give a voice to fans and people who want to design and write for the realms, and who want to go to the DMs Guild and see what their peers say about their work. Those things are really important. So my answer is, in Julia Roberts mode, what do you want those consonants to be named? It's very important. It's very important for people to let their own wellspring of imagination flow forth, and to come up with great stories and about the realms, because it's funny. It's a funny thing about the Forgotten Realms, and it's a lesson that Ed taught me many moons ago. It's not always who's right. It's sometimes who was first. And when you put something into the realms that is fun and exciting to read and gives respect to what was written before, and fits within the framework of the information that we already have, everyone will look at it and go, yeah, that's fantastic, that works, that looks great, that's a brilliant explanation, that's a really great addition to this area of the lore. And before you know it, it's the great joy of the internet. If you put it out there, it will be repeated so many times that eventually people will say, yeah, that's the way it's always has been, or that's the best explanation we've ever come across. So I'm adopting that. I'm taking that as gospel, until someone with an official hat on tells me different. So my answer to that question is, it's a non-answer. It is just make it up yourself and make it good, and go with it, and share it with everyone, and make the realms live.
No, I agree with that. That's a really good answer, George, actually. Yep. Because I think if more people would share their home realms information as just a community project, that it would make it so much richer for everybody else.
And remember earlier we were talking about Scardale?
Yes.
Chandler's Cross was added by a fan.
Oh, really?
Yeah, that wasn't in the original realms, and we just, that works, and it became official.
That's really good. I like that.
That gives me cause for a follow-up question to that. Can you guys cite examples where fans' ideas or inspiration from a fan has been attributed to a game, a module, a role, a place, a character name, anything that's been thrown in for the love of a fan?
Oh, my favourite is one of mine, which is when everyone plays Lords
George notwithstanding, of course.
No, but when everyone plays the Lords of Waterdeep board game, and they come across Artur Morlun, the Baron of Blood, the vampire of Waterdeep. In 1998, Eric Boyd and I were doing some work on the Fallen Kingdom, and Ed provided us with lots of notes that he had, and he talked to us about Morlun Castle, which features in his novel Elminster and the Making of a Maid. And Eric came up with the idea, I want it to be a haunted castle, and I want there to be a vampire in there. And I said, well, shivers, we better give him some information. So I gave him his name. I came up with Artur Morland, and I said he was an outlaw from the Shune lands. And so when I have a bit of a chuckle every time I see that card come out, and it's Artur Morland. I said, oh, I gave him his name. Wow! But it's little things like that. You know, you don't know where Wizards of the Coast will take its lore from. Their DM's Guild policy is if they see something at the DM's Guild which is just so good and so wonderful that they want to incorporate it into the canon realms, they have the ability to do so. And that would be a dream for many Realms fans. It's how the grand history of the Realms was created. It was Brian James's fantastic work to get a consolidated, brilliant timeline, drawing together all of the sources that he put up for free on the net and for Realms fans to enjoy. And Wizards of the Coast looked at that and said, we can't do any better. And they took it in-house and gave him due credit, thankfully, for all of his hard work. And then a few of us got a chance to work to make it into the product that it became. And it's still one of the most popular products out there, long out of print, but highly sought after by the fans.
Mm-hmm.
And there's the picture of him I just put on the chat there.
Yes, that was on the Facebook page. Someone came up with some art for Artur Morland. That was fantastic. It was just today.
Yes,
absolutely brilliant.
Yeah, that's I remember seeing it on there today. That's why I put it on there. So no, it's a great picture, a great depiction of him too.
And there are many, many things that have made it into the Realms. A group of gamers who used to come to every year to Gen Con back in the Milwaukee days, their group of adventurers, their player characters were the Twilight Hunters. So I snuck them into Waterdeep. I snuck their headquarters into Waterdeep, and it became official.
Really?
Yeah. There's another thing. Somebody asked about a few weeks ago about Saint Solars, the thrice martyred. That is a real person, Ed Solars from TSR. Every time TSR would expand and then expand and contract as publishing fortunes went up and down. And last hired, first fired. So Ed Solars got let go 3 times and then hired back the moment they had more money. So we put him in the Realms as Saint Solars, the thrice martyred. I didn't do that. That was an inside TSR joke.
Oh, that's so funny.
That's pretty good.
That explains the Texan accent and the cigar in his depiction.
Yeah. But I mean, there are lots of tiny little Easter eggs like that. Jeff Grubb used to put in lots of them. I would put them in when I could get away with them. Sometimes I wrote bad puns into Undermountain. One good turn deserves another. And Stephen took that right off, but left the names, and it's like, oh, so we're burying the bad pun, but not getting rid of it. Okay. So there are lots of jokes. I remember when Eric was writing Dritz Do'Urden's Guide to the Underdark, and he said, I'm making you a dragon. I said, sorry? And he said, I'm going to make you a dragon in Shed Nassad. And so I was part of a cool family, the Morrowind Blue Dragons of the Nether Mountains, and I became a dragon. I do remember him saying to him, can you just not use my full surname, make it an anagram, mix it up a bit, do something. He goes, no, I'm using that. I went, okay. Yep. It is what it is. Well, if this legal thing doesn't work out, it's a second career, right?
That's right. I could be a rapacious dragon. What a good idea. Actually, I'm already rapacious. I'm a lawyer, so that works well.
Oh, dear.
And I actually have another one from it's a short question, and it's one that was very short. It's a supplement that was very short-lived in Forgotten Realms, and this is off of Candlekeep from Gel Core. He wants to know if there's any more information on chronomancers or chronomancy in the Forgotten Realms. He said the only chronomancer he knows of is Jiraiya Kronos.
I would love to answer, but I am out of time.
No.
No. There is very little because that was some person's on the staff at TSR great idea, and somebody else said, "You know what can of worms you just opened?" And that's why.
Right.
And I gave him the old Spider Robinson thing. So there I was. He said it was a time machine, and he said, there's a pair of ducks in the time machine. I looked, but I could not find any ducks. Not one, not two, not a pair of them. I could not find the pair of ducks anywhere. But he told me they were there.
Look, time travel in the realms is very interesting because it exists. We know through the Arcane Age products, we know through Cormanthea, we know through the Netherall box set that there are time gates scattered around. There's one in the Spine of the World. There's one in the mountains bordering Termish. We know that there is the spell that allows you to travel through time, of course, which only can be cast with Mystra's express approval. But there are little hints in the published Realms lore about time travel that has happened. Anyone who read Ed's Old Dragon articles and came across the workbook, which was a compilation of spells of the apprentices of the 7 wizards of Mithranor. And one of those spells, in fact, one of those spells made sense after the Cormanthea accessory came out, which was the spell Dismind, which was attributed to the Blackstaff, to Kelvin. But the other one that always didn't make sense was that there was a spell, Laeral's Dancing Dwemer. How does that go into a workbook that was created before she was born? And then you start to think about that, and then you flip across to another article that Ed wrote back in Dragon 124, where he showcased it was called Sailors on the Sea of Air, and he showcased this fantastic flying ship, which ends with just this little snippet about how it picked up Storm and Laeral from Mithranor ere it fell and took them across to the Moonshades. And you're thinking, well, someone must have put them there. Someone must have put them there as children, as infants, as young teens, as adults. They must have travelled back in time. Why? Who did it? Elminster, perhaps, through the decree of Mystra. She wanted them to accelerate their learning in magic, and the best way she thought was to send them back to Mithranor. There's lots of stories like that in the realms, which can be explained if you use that magic of magic. It explains everything. But time travel exists in the realms, and I just think that we just need to find the ways where it has affected the realms lore and the history, and weave all of those things together into great stories.
Yes, but the inherent danger should mean that everybody should think once, twice, 3 times, and more about whether or not they're going to dabble in time travel. There is a convention called Grand Con in Grand Rapids, Michigan, and when the Lords of Waterdeep game was first released, Wizards sent a whole bunch of sets of it to that con to be given away as prizes to the winner of Lords of Waterdeep games. And the hook was that you got to play Lords of Waterdeep with Jeff Grubb and Ed Greenwood. And I was able to get lots of people to think twice about playing certain cards by dancing around the room like Cher, singing, "If I could turn back time."
Oh, no.
And with all of the body movements that she does in the official video on the battleship, all the flouncing, all the dancing. I didn't have the costume, thank God.
But you really wished you had.
Yes, and I could make gamers around that table think, I'm not going to play this card because Ed's going to do the dance again.
and the deadly veils.
I want people to approach the thought of using time travel with the same trepidation, because it's a can of worms. But George is absolutely right. I have scattered clues all over the place about time travel, and I have bound Mystra and her permission and crossing her and the cost of that into almost all of them that I've put there for a good reason.
No, that makes absolute sense, because it's a dangerous form of magic.
Yes.
It can be. So Gilcor also has something not quite realms related to ask you. He said that there are plenty of tricks and tips and guides for writing books out there for any fledgling writers. He was curious if there's any tips for writing and organizing notes for a new Forgotten Realms project or adventure that you have. For example, do you use some sort of template or guide when you're doing your information on the realms?
Oh, can I?
Yes, you can. Yes, you can.
The great joy of the realms is that there are decades of published products, and the great thing about those, other than their content, of course, is that they give you wonderful formatting ideas, a way to set out. So if you're going to write a regional source book, for example, you can grab Lands of Intrigue box set or Empires of the Shining Sea and look at the way that was set out and take from that what you think works for your project. You can look at the Volos guides. If you want to do a book on gods, you can look at the faiths and avatars, etc., etc. And so it's really important to look at the way things have been done before and use as much of that as you think is useful for your project, because it gives you a great skeleton to use and add the bones to. I'm an unashamed stealer of other people's fantastic ideas and adding, well, my maybe not so fantastic ideas to them and trying to make a greater whole. But things like looking at how other realms authors and lore masters have gone about their trade is always a fantastic way to give you an idea of the way you should approach your project. And there are some formats that are just superior. For example, I've always loved Ed's city write-up format that was first showcased in the Forgotten Realms Adventures hardcover way back when first edition became second edition. All of the information there which lets any dungeon master on the fly pick up a city and get his player characters where they need to go and who they need to see in an eye blink. Just fantastic. So those types of things work because they're really good. And so when you're looking at writing your own project, you should steal formats that work and adapt them to the project you're doing. And then of course there's the other great thing, which is research. Do your research. Work out what you're writing about and do your best to try and track down the resources that have talked about that place or that person or that organisation before. And it's amazing when you read widely like that, how many things you see in the Realms lore that you say, wow, that's really good. I've got to remember that Red Wizard. I have to remember that Orc Chieftain. I have to remember that spell or that type of elven architecture. And, you know, I have 3 notebooks filled with scribbles, page references and product references for all this extraneous scattered Realms lore that I know one day I'll say, I remember writing that. I've just got to find the book where I scribbled it and then weave it into my current project. Knowing your sources and being true and respectful to the people who have written before you will make whatever project you're working on all the better.
Absolutely. Yeah. Anything else to add to that, Ed?
Yeah, just one thing. I agree with everything George just said. I would only add one thing. If you're coming to the Realms new and you're not sure if something's been written about or detailed, go to a place like the fans of our Greenwood page, like Sages of the Forgotten Realms on Facebook, like Candlekeep, and ask, has anybody ever covered the treants of whatever? People will tell you. The Realms fans are a generous bunch. We all love the Realms. We help each other. Ask. Rather than just saying, oh, I guess I have to make up everything about Impulsor. No, there's this guy you can ask. But somebody might not know any better. Well, there's nothing in the... Because I've only got these 2 products on the Realms, and it's mentioned in one and it's on the map in the other. I guess I can make up anything. You might want to stand on the shoulders of the giants who are already there. So, yes, go and ask.
Exactly. They've already done the work for you.
Yeah, if you're not sure, ask. And little story, not to name any authors' names, but this goes for at least 2 authors that every D&D fan will know. And it also goes for about another dozen fantasy authors that most people who read fantasy fiction will know. There have been times in the past where authors have forgotten the eye color of a character or their hair color, and they have, in recent days, created accounts that are not linked to them, gone onto forums and asked, or made a comment, and been corrected by 42 helpful fans, and they say, thank you. So it's that eye color. Very good. Thank you. Now I don't have to go and look it up.
Bob has a great story about that, where he said when he was writing one of his, this is early on, probably about his 5th or 6th book, he'd forgotten something he'd written about one of his characters, and he couldn't for the life of him find it, and he just went on to one of the places and said, hey, can somebody tell me about this? They said you had a deluge of people giving him the answers.
Yep, yes, I didn't want to reveal that one, but yes.
Oops.
Well, when there's a banana peel in the middle of the stage, and we've been running back and forth across the stage all night, sooner or later...
Yep. Invariably, it's going to happen.
Curry, do you have any more questions? Are you
Oh,
there?
that is so not fair. You totally caught me with a chip in my mouth.
Oh.
Quick, send commands through that chip. Curry can do our bidding. Oh, it's not that sort of chip.
Oh, that's right.
Stop playing with your emotion chip, Curry.
The eagle flies south at midnight.
That's right. The pearl is in the river.
The eagles flies undone.
You're killing me here, guys.
And Jeff is going to pass an entire chip through his nose sideways.
I think I just did. Oh no! So you got any other questions, Curry?
No, I think I'm tapped out. I got everybody's in that I'd hoped to this evening, and I think most everything that I wanted to, other than like a fan inclusion. I think I indirectly got my own personal fan inclusion tonight, because between the two of you saying, you know, curried favor. I'm like, oh, they're talking about me. It's so special.
Everything's better with curry.
That's right.
Hey, man, I won't argue with you there.
You know, and I actually have one last fan has a question. Not really a question about the realms, but, well, it is. It is. Yeah. No, he doesn't want to know what kind of underwear that Elminster wears.
Oh, good.
He doesn't wear any.
Yep. Keep going.
I kind of figured that. Peter Wart asks, with the success of streams and podcasts such as Critical Role, would you entertain the idea of an occasional stream of a Realms campaign series?
If you're asking me, the answer is yes. I would love to entertain that idea. And that idea has been floated in the past, and I have actually dungeon mastered a session over Skype for a convention, two conventions now, and I've done a Twitch TV one. But the problem is time. They drink time. And just remember, every time you want me to do that, and yeah, I can put on the funny voices. Yes, I can act. Yes, I can project my voice. Yes, I can bring the realms to life with just beautiful flowery prose. I can show you what a Who Elminster really sounds and looks like. I can do the whole 9 yards, but everything I'm doing is delaying the next Realms product from my pen.
Yeah.
That's the choice you're making. And of course, that's also the same thing when somebody says, okay, tell me all about all the gods of the realms. No, everything else that you haven't published yet. No, I need more. Okay, just remember, every time you do that, the next product you were hoping or expecting from me is receding into the future, because I don't have an army of clones. I'm just this one clone.
Yet.
Send in the clone. This clown here.
Yet, that's right, yet.
Yet.
Yeah, think of the movie Synchronicity. We'll make plenty of copies of that.
If I could turn back time.
Oh, no, wait.
I'm gonna get you like the whole getup, the wig.
The fishnets, oh boy.
Oh yeah.
You got to learn to do that toss of your head, too.
Oh, I can do the toss of the head. I'm not so sure about having the 4,000 sailors.
You're used to one at a time.
One at a time. Ding! So sailors always travel in pairs, you know that.
Oh dear. Okay.
I tell you what, I have no more questions. You've chewed through every single one of my fans' questions here. So, George, do you have anything else you wanna add?
No, that's I'm out.
Otherwise,
Otherwise, I've been making stuff up.
George, would you like to throw out any of your social media links that people can get in touch with you at?
I'm accessible everywhere on social media. I use my name, so I don't have any cool secret name. So if people want to find me, they'll find me. So that's not a problem. But I'm more than happy to interact on social media with any Realms fans out there. And I've got a thread at Candlekeep in the Chamber of Sages if anyone wants to ask any questions, and they can always PM me there with an email address if they want to correspond via email. Always happy to talk to Realms fans about the Forgotten Realms.
Great, appreciate it.
Thank you, George. And Ed, we know you're at fans of Ed Greenwood occasionally, but you're more so on Twitter, correct?
Yes, at the Edverse, all one word, but capital T, capital E, capital V, the Edverse.
Right.
just because I tend to see that more quickly. Yes, I get notifications to my email from Facebook, but half the time I'm at work, and as in at my day job.
Right.
And it's somewhat frowned upon to, oh, let's go on Twitter, oh, let's go on Facebook, when I'm actually being paid to do something else. So although I would love to, I actually tend to see things faster on Twitter. So,
Okay.
but again, please, I love to chat, but there's only one of me, and only a certain amount of time in my day, and Twitter has its limitations.
Right.
If you want me to write a novel to you, I am going to be driven nuts trying to do it in Twitter dribs and drabs and linking them all together. And I'm going to have to retweet you just because it's the only way I can link comments together in order. You see what I mean? So
Right.
yeah. So doing this, what we're doing now, is probably a better forum for heavy-duty Realms lore.
Yeah, I was just going to say that I think this is the best forum that we can use instead of the 150 characters, whatever it is on Twitter at a time. I think this is much better. I think the fans are really enjoying it. I'm getting a lot of positive feedback on the podcast that we've already done.
Well,
Guys,
until now.
you heard it here. If you want to be involved in these guys and pick their brains, this is the place to do it. This is the best forum to make that happen. So by all means, we love everybody's submissions to the podcasts and their questions. I think pretty much every time we get every question in. So if you're a little shy or you're not sure if your question will be picked, don't even worry about that. We're pretty good at getting everybody involved.
Absolutely, and we're talking about adding an extra hour just for Spike Murphy.
Oh, and by the way, if you happen to be within spitting distance of Port Hope, Ontario, in Canada, next Thursday, the 28th, I will be going to a restaurant called Gana Rascals, starting at 7 o'clock, and dungeon mastering a new Realms adventure. And it's a restaurant, so anybody can sit in and listen. The people who get to play, the restaurant has already picked. I got to draw the last one from a hat, but everybody else has already been picked. But we're going to do more of them.
Right.
Okay, so, and I'll let everybody know. So if they happen to be within spitting distance and they want something autographed, or they want to buttonhole me about a particular question about the Realms, or they want to see what Ed looks like when he's doing his pratfalls as Dungeon Master.
Well, buttonholing sounds a little painful, but...
Well, no, what's really painful is when they pin something to your lapel and you're not wearing lapels.
That's a nice mohair shirt you have there, Ed. I'm not wearing your shirt.
Yes. Okay, I knew we'd get to the bear jokes.
Well, I wanted to personally thank George. George, we love you, and it's incredible to be able to sit down and talk with you for this long, and to pick your brain along with Ed and see y'all riff off and back and forth with each other. I really hope that you can join us again.
It was my absolute pleasure, everyone, and thank you so much for being given the opportunity. I would love to do this again, and really, really enjoyed it. Thank you very much.
Oh, no, we really appreciate you giving up your Saturday, as it is 16 hours ahead there in the land down.
Yeah.
That's right. And eat a Vegemite sandwich for me.
About to do just that.
Oh man, I still have my jar of Vegemite. It's almost gone. I've been savoring it.
Well, you let me know when it runs out, and I'll send you another. That's easy.
I'll do that. I promise. Thank you. And Ed,
I want to thank George because I got to see him. He turned his camera on, so it's like having a visit. Hi! Come back soon.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
there's beer. There's beer.
Virtual beer, but we have beer. And Ed, as with you always, thank you so much for your time. I know it's
a pleasure.
And I know the fans love it, and we try to get as many questions as we can, and they love hearing. I had a comment from somebody the other day. He just loves hearing about the way you did your home campaign when you talked about the crazy, the band of crazy adventurers and how they became who they are and became the Knights of Mithranor. And he said that was one of the best parts of one of the podcasts, was listening to how you created all that. So hopefully we'll get into more of some of that stuff in future podcasts. So
Oh, I'd love to. My players are special. They are why the Realms is as detailed as it is, because they wanted that detail. And they're great actors. And the other key was strong female representation, so it was great.
Right. And also, Curry, thank you for helping me out with this. I do appreciate it.
Absolutely, anytime.
Yeah, no, yeah, I like having you around for this. So, well, anyway, we're gonna wrap it up, and thank you again. I think we did almost 3.5 hours here, so that's a record for us. So I get to edit this now over the next week.
3.5 hours of quality time wasting.
That's right. None of it's wasted. I promise. I'm just to see the smile of my wife and my son as they kept peeking in the door, to hear us talking in here. So that was worth it right there. So, but thank you, and I'm not sure if we're going to be able to do this next week or not for my time, but I'll get together with you about our next one that we're going to be doing. Okay.
Sure. Okay.
Thanks a lot, guys.
Thank you.
Have a great weekend, guys.
Take care. Have a good weekend. See you all.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.
George. Thank you.
Bye. Yeah. Bye-bye.
We hope you enjoyed that interview with the Old Mage with special guest George Krashos. Our next interview is going to be with George, Ed, and Eric Boyd, so please tune in, and we plan to have a good time. Till then, keep playing in the realms.